Hi, welcome to today's ADSO Exchange. The ADSO partners with champion industry partner members to produce over a dozen webinars throughout the year that provide thought leadership in the dentistry space and educational training and content for DSO departments. And so we're really grateful today to have all of you joining us, as well as Overjet leading a presentation and Q&A focused on the opportunities that artificial intelligence is bringing DSOs and the broader dental industry. So I'd like to say just a couple of remarks here. We have a really intimate group here today, and it's a great group of panelists here as well. So I encourage everyone to use the Q&A function on the bottom of their screen to submit any questions whenever you have them, and we might get to them on the fly, or we'll save them for the end. So I just want to also just note two things quickly. We've got a handful of upcoming study club meetings. They start next week. There's 2 of them with HR and operations and IT. If you are a DSO member here or not, and you're interested in joining one of those, please reach out to me or go to the events website. Also, if you are signed up to attend our event in Austin, our housing hotel block closes on Sunday. Please make sure you have a hotel block, but if you're still considering, if you want to join us there, please register as soon as you can. We'd love to see you there as well. That is for our next level conference that's focused on DSOs, size 2 locations to 75. So bringing us back here to today, I'm really excited to introduce Dr. Barfield. He's leading our panel of speakers here today. And he's the clinical manager at Overjet. He earned his dental degree with highest honors at the University of UNC Chapel Hill. But he's practiced dentistry in the U.S. Air Force and for communities in multiple regions of the U.S., most recently Atlanta. And it's interesting, you've done so kind of half and half of your career has been split in practicing general dentistry as well as orthodontics on the specialty side. So I think it's a really great perspective, and we're really excited to have you lead us on this conversation. So without further ado, Dr. Barfield, I will hand it over to you.
Richie, thanks a lot. And you're right. I think an interesting background for sure, and somewhat leading up to my current position, which I am really excited about, and that is with working in artificial intelligence, right? The next large transformation in dentistry, and one that I think is going to be the largest one that I've seen in my clinical career. So really excited to be able to be a part of this. Today's discussion is going to focus on implementing AI within a DSO, and ultimately increasing adoption of this technology within your organization. We're going to touch on things like setting up a successful pilot, best practices for expansion from pilot to a full rollout, how to maintain adoption among your offices and your staff, and then ultimately measuring success and sharing that story with your colleagues. I'm really excited to be joined by 2 rock stars of the DSO space. And undoubtedly, some of you in the audience will recognize Dr. Alip Choksi as well as Armanda Lester. They're both from North American Dental Group. And Dr. Choksi and Armanda are leaders within NADG and have implemented AI technology into 200 NADG offices. Dr. Choksi serves as the Vice President of Clinical Services at NADG, also maintains his active dental practice in Toledo, Ohio. He's an active member of the North American Dental Group's Oral Health Board, which is comprised of several committees, including compliance and clinical quality improvement, specialty and culture committees as well. He's involved with updating clinical guidelines within the organization and in partnering on dental innovation with AI. Alip, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad you're here.
Appreciate it.
And then Armanda is Vice President of Operations over NADG. Armanda leads the company in overseeing operations and building strategies, systems, and optimizing workflows to meet current and future needs of their organization. She acts as a key leader for clinical ops and is a member of the company's Clinical Innovations Committee. I work with both Dr. Choksi and Armanda regularly. And Armanda, we're really great to have you here today. We miss Dan, but I'm sure that you'll be able to speak for him.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So leading us off again, guys, I guess a question that I would want to ask is, to someone in your shoes, why AI? And then secondarily, why Overjet? And I guess speaking to the why AI is probably the most important consideration.
Well, I could start. I mean, I think AI is it's a hot topic right now, right? I think everybody's been talking about it for quite some time, at least for the last couple of years. You have, early adopters, guys like Elon Musk, guys like, who started this kind of discussion several years back, and started talking about autonomous cars and all this stuff, and just kind of brought it to the forefront. And next thing you know, we're, in every industry out there, we're talking about automation, how to make things more efficient. And in healthcare, of course, AI has been around for a while. I have a lot of friends who are radiologists and work in the healthcare sector, and they're using this pretty routinely. And, when we were looking, at our business, we thought, well, we're trying to scale something, especially in a larger organization, and do it consistently and well. And this technology is it's just perfect. It fits right into helping us get to our vision of, standardized care, doing it with consistency, doing it with predictability. And so, here we are. But we're just at the forefront, in my opinion. I think we're really just getting started. I think this technology is it's going to grow. It's going to get bigger. It's going to allow us to do more things. So, I've been thinking about this for several years before we even brought this, into our organization. And we looked at a lot of them. We've looked at various different AI companies out there. And, Overjet stood out. We looked at Pearl, we looked at NVIDIA, we looked at all of them. And I think they all are great. I think all these companies are doing very similar things. And we just picked, a partner that worked, and here we are. And I don't want to keep talking because you probably have a lot more questions, but this is kind of where we are right now.
And Alan, could you speak to some of the clinical challenges that NADG needed to solve, or perhaps you needed to solve in your practice, and where you saw an opportunity for AI to be able to help?
Absolutely. So, I've been fortunate enough to work with a lot of doctors. I do a lot of mentoring for a lot of doctors. I've probably mentored almost 100 doctors by now in my career. And one thing that stands out is the lack of consistency. When we're working in group practice, oftentimes you may have multiple doctors in a practice setting, and Dr. A will treatment plan something a certain way, Dr. B will do something slightly different or a variation, and then Dr. C may do something, right? So you could potentially get variations in treatment planning, and then the very same patient that you see may have a change in plan. And if you're working together, sharing patients, we've quickly found that there's a little difference. There's the way we treatment plan. And so this technology is perfect because it gives us a level playing field. First of all, it gives us data. It's outputting data to us to say, hey, it's highlighting things for us and saying, okay, so if all three of those doctors look at that highlighted thing, whatever it is, caries, perio, it allows us to then work off of something that's common, right? And I think this is the start of the standardization and consistency we're talking about. And so I think that's kind of how I see this kind of playing out now, because we've been using Overjet for about almost a year now. And I think we're already seeing that come through. We're seeing that patients are getting more consistent communication between people, right? So it's one thing if you go to your doctor, but then if the hygienist is saying the same thing, the assistant's saying the same thing, between doctors is saying the same thing, it builds more trust and understanding, like, hey, you know what? All these people are saying the same thing.
Almost like a centralized source of truth, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Armando, I guess from the ops standpoint, what types of challenges did you guys foresee before you brought AI on? What types of problems did you want to solve?
So bringing in AI, I know that just operationally, as we're marketing our organization, the new generation patients and, clinical team members, doctors, hygienists, they demand technology. It's no longer a nice to have, it's a need to have, it's a must. And so that was one of the things I know that when we were bringing on the AI into our organization was something that we knew was going to set us apart differently from other organizations. Aside from like the normal resources that you have in equipment, like this was a new technology that, is helping us like bridge the communication from the patients and the doctors. So that was something that was challenging that now we're starting to really integrate into the organization differently, with our methodologies of like how we've rolled out the AI, specifically with our chat.
Sure. How did you guys actually begin to decide? How'd you make the decision to begin a pilot? To actually say, let's not just sit on the edge of the pool. I think I'm going to jump in, even though the water might be cold.
Absolutely. So we wanted to do the pilot, and truthfully, we started our pilot with 10 practices, and we picked, obviously our awesome leader, Dr. Choksi, as the champion of it. And then we decided intentionally to have some skeptics in there, some newer doctors, some tenured doctors, some rural locations, and some like high volume locations. So we picked, just a variety of demographics in our organization to be a part of the pilot, so that we could really like work through a ton of the kinks and really get like a lot of the feedback on how it's going to be adopted in the organization. And then also like some of the shifts that we needed to make specifically like cater to our organization. And so our goal, we started out hoping that we would, within 10 months, know how we could roll this out organizationally and if it was going to be a success or not. And truthfully, within 6 weeks, we started to map out our strategy to have it organization wide by the end of this year.
That's amazing, Armanda. That's a very powerful statement. What were some of the metrics and indicators that led you to that really quick feeling?
Yeah, absolutely. So the indicators were, we did host, regular touch bases. We did one-on-one touch bases with our providers and our teams. And then we did like group touch bases weekly. And so the indicators that we saw quickly that jumped out were really performance-based. So we saw a lot of increased acceptance for scaling and route planning. We saw a lot of increased acceptance in restoration. We saw a lot of increased acceptance on like crown and bridge for patients. So it quickly taught us that the platform we were using really bridged the gap of communication and helping people understand the importance of their oral health. And then furthermore, Dan, our chief information and analytics officer, created a really great Power BI resource that helped us understand the data in real time. And most recently, we were able to integrate our net promoter scores into that. So we've also saw an increase in our patient reviews as a result of this technology.
Yeah, that's incredible. Dr. Choksi, my mind is drawn to clinical questions, right? As a clinician, that's what I think about first and foremost. Indicators that you saw from the clinical side that at that 6 weeks, and maybe it wasn't at that 6 weeks, maybe Armanda was out ahead of the curve here, but things that you saw that indicated we need to go forward.
Yeah, so I think just one more thing about the pilot, and to answer your question, I think first of all, the other part of it was we wanted early adopters. We wanted doctors who were engaged in this technology. We didn't want to just put it in their office and it not, be utilized. So I think that's the first thing. So obviously we have excitement, right? We have excitement around the technology. We picked the right, first cohort. And for me personally, leading this charge on the clinical front of it, at least, it was cool because you get to see how good you are, I guess, is probably the best way I could say it. You're treatment planning, the way you normally would. You're looking at, decay, perio, the way you do. And to know that you have your information validated by this technology is great. And so I think that's what really set it off. It was more like, hey, let me plan something. And we started to plan first and look at the AI second. It almost became a game to see how good we were at treatment planning, and then know that it was validated. And so then we just flipped the switch now, because we realized that what we were planning in the first place was very accurate. And so that I can speak in that way from my lens. Now, that may not have been a lens from a newer doctor where they may have questioned something. And so I guess from a clinical front, the best way I could say it is it eliminates some of the things that we get tied up as clinicians on, the early incipient lesion as one example. Do we watch it, or do we do something about it? Or do we crown that tooth, or do we, fill that tooth? It's like, those are two decision points that often doctors get kind of hung up on. Do we go one way or another? And what this technology essentially does is it gives us more quantitative data points to say, okay, well, with this percentage of tooth is missing, or this much, this decay has gone this far into the tooth. So it totally like visualizes it even further for us, to make decision points. I think that's how we're really leveraging the technology. It's to get, to use that now as part of our kind of way of diagnosing. So
Yeah, 100%. More data, better data, right?
correct.
Help us make better decisions.
But garbage in, garbage out too. So right. So the reading is only as good as the data that you give it. Right. So I think that's another thing that we're learning, and that's actually pretty cool because, as the technology continues to evolve, it's not perfect, right? We're constantly looking at what it's giving us, and it's still, sometimes you'll get an artifact in an X-ray and it may light up like something is there, but it's not. And that's where we're still, making those decisions. And this is still just a tool, but it's getting better, which is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And it's super fun to watch. I know you agree with that. Now, let's jump into sort of the mechanics of it, right? Because there's a project that occurs when we undertake something like this. And I know, Armanda, you've been intimately involved with it, you and Dan especially. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the mechanics of the pilot and maybe the project overall, sort of the scope and the vision?
Yeah, absolutely. So the mechanics of the project, as we talked about earlier, we did start with our 10 practices, and we wanted to have a variety of people that could give, provide like raw feedback, real feedback. And then as we started to roll it out, we did it in waves. So we were very intentional about like making sure that people understood the premise of the project, how it could be integrated into every role in the office, not just with our doctors, but there is a space and responsibility to Overjet for every single team member in the office. And so we took it in waves. And what we did was, we rolled it out. We started with a training session, and it was like an all hands on deck training session. We blocked out, a lunch hour. We made it a really exciting, fun, and it was very interactive. And we ensured that, we were, making sure that people were able to speak up and ask questions in real time. And then the follow-up process started. And I think that's the most crucial part of the success of this rollout, is that ensuring that we were following up and following through with what we expected from the platform. So the things that we do are we host regular one-on-ones that may be just from like a provider to provider perspective, but there's a global one where weekly we talk about successes, opportunities, and how each office is implemented into their practices differently.
Mm-hmm. And somebody mentioned a champion earlier. How did you go about identifying a champion or champions if there were champions?
Well, clearly we had Dr. Choksi immediately, who is always our champion, especially when we're rolling out any type of like new clinical innovation. And then after that, we really put this on every doctor is the leader of their practice. Truthfully, it is one of the unspoken rules in dentistry. As you come in as a doctor, a lot of people, specifically in the DSO world, think I'm just an employee, but when your license hangs, that's, you're instantly the leader. And so we really started to elevate and promote the leadership from the doctor perspective. And then secondary, we went into the hygiene role and, expected that to be a big part of the function and success of AI. So one of the things particularly that we've talked about a lot on our wave, and each wave gets better, truthfully. And so I can't wait to see how it rounds out at the end of the year, but really just identifying the responsibility in each role in the practice. And so I think this is the first time when we're rolling out new technology that there is a function for every role. So it starts at the front desk. The office manager can lead their daily huddle with Overjet, and then it goes into the patient facing, interaction with each type of provider and clinical support team member. And furthermore, the one unspoken thing that people aren't talking about enough is the support staff drought that we're going through currently. So I think that has played a huge role in education. So we're getting a lot of really, really fresh team members with little experience in dental currently. And that's just the way of the industry. And I know everybody is experiencing it. So this has been a really crucial piece of educating our new team members on, how to talk to the patients. Also, furthermore, how to support their doctors differently. And then the big win, truthfully, is how we're able to communicate holistically with our insurance companies. Now, finally, we're speaking the same language.
Amazing. Yeah, that's super impactful, particularly as it regards the lack of support staff and how hard it is to not only hire them, but maintain them, right? Tough to keep them in the chair. We talk about training all the time, right? So the technology is going to be trained to you, but I know you guys have a specific and what I think is a real unique setup in terms of how you're actually training Overjet. How are, training the trainer, as it were?
Right. So when we started the pilot, and we love our partnership with Overjet, you guys have been such an awesome team member to us and support to us. But what we quickly realized is that when it was coming from Overjet, it was exciting and it was fresh. But when we transitioned to owning the training ourselves from our organization level and really like catered it to what we needed as an organization, people really started to understand and adopt it a lot quicker because we were in it with them. You know, it wasn't just something that like we outsourced. We were in it with them. We became the subject matter experts at our level and we're able to like in real time like help support and coach. So I think that was like a really big key to the success thus far, was transitioning from Overjet leading our trainings to really owning it from an organizational level.
Sure.
Yeah, and just to add to what Armanda said, I mean, adoption is kind of the theme of today, right? It's like, how are we getting the teams to adopt? And one of the things that we do track is utilization, right? And Dan, who's not on this call, is, you know, put the dashboards together to track it so we can see, you know, our office is truly using this technology, you know, as we roll it out in waves.
Mm-hmm.
And we've gone through the hurdles, right? You know, didn't have a username, password. We kind of hit some just basic hurdles of I can't even get in. And once we pass some of those, you know, we start to see the adoption rise. But I think as part of our trainings, it's been more just using it as kind of the way of life. So I think part of the way we do the internal training is, you know, this is the new way that we're going to be viewing this information, you know, making it our default setting.
There is like the whole inspect what you expect, you know, methodology. So within like the data, like Dr. Chipsy mentioned, those that are not using it, that's like our opportunity. We reach out, we're proactive about it and just like ask, you know, what's the opportunity that we have here to ensure that you and your team do use it. And truthfully, one of the call outs that was like the best was, you know, we're short staffed right now. And that was our opportunity to educate, like this is in that type of environment, the best time to use it, right? Because it does help create workflow efficiency in every role. And so that was a big win for us and an opportunity to like help the team understand it from a different perspective.
Sure. And the timing was right too.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned implementation, and was this an easy thing to implement? Did it have its hurdles? Dr. Chokesy mentioned we didn't have our logins, but overall, how was the implementation of the actual technology?
Yeah, of course. It was easy to implement from our IT team down to the field level. The one thing was the creating the habit, right? And that's always the hardest part when you're implementing something new, is building that habit, that muscle memory to like instantly go in. And so part of our training in our workflow is really teaching people like, moment one, you step in the office, right? Moment two, you pull up Overjet. And then again, going back to that user component and inspecting what we expect and like going and reaching out and just saying like, this isn't, we don't go to the side of that people don't want this in their practice. We really go to the side of like, we have an educational opportunity and how can we support this differently?
Yeah. And you spoke about waves earlier, and I think you guys have a total of 8 waves. Is that correct?
We have 7.
7 waves. Okay. Talk to me about how regional involvement has sort of played a part in the success of Overjet within NADG.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have heavily engaged our regional leaders in each type of wave. It's their responsibility to, you know, build out their training times, be a part of the like in-person part of the training with their team members. And prior to the waves for each region rolling out, we invite them to a call and we teach them Overjet as well. So it is really unique because we're teaching our operations leaders who don't have a lot of like clinical and PMS, you know, day-to-day responsibility. They're now getting excited because they're learning the platform as well as their team. And so they're able to speak the same language, you know, have the same responsibility and go in. And as we're bringing in newer doctors or newer hygienists or newer team members, it's like their opportunity to also shine and like have that like clinical parallel with them.
Dr. Chokesy, you and I know that some of our colleagues are skeptics in general. Their personality traits are to be a skeptic, right? Yeah. How about the skeptical doctor? How do we communicate with he or she, and how do we get them on our level, or perhaps we on their level?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And yes, we definitely have skeptics. In fact, we had skeptics even in our rollouts. And, you know, we had seasoned doctors who were like, I don't need this technology. I'm good. I don't need it, kind of thing. And I think just immersing into it a little bit further and then double downing with their teams and allowing them to immerse in it. It's very simple. It's very user friendly. It's just a few clicks, and it's very intuitive. And once that doctor, and I'm speaking of one particular doctor, once he realized, what it can do, and the ancillary things beyond the highlighting of the cavity and the perio, but having the dashboards and the opportunity finders within the platform, I think it spoke to the power of the technology. That was more than, hey, I know how to treatment plan, but it wasn't, I think they had to get over the hurdle of, is it doing it right? And is it taking away my autonomy of diagnosing? And really it was quite the opposite. It was more like, it was just a tool, as part of your process.
And not unlike digital x-rays, practice management software, iTero scanners, and all the other iterations of technology that we've been through, right? Eventually we adopt those. Even the skeptics do.
100%. Yeah, exactly.
I got a quick question in from the audience. This is for you, Dr. C. What was the final decision in you going with Overjet over Pearl or Vidya?
That's a great question. So we actually, we vetted all of them, and we actually got to play with all of them. And I think why Overjet stood out, at least for me, in the front, was its existing partnerships with insurance companies. They had kind of a little bit of a head start there. The way the interface lit up, it just looked super intuitive. Not that the other ones weren't intuitive, but it was very clear that they were processing things at a rapid pace, because when I looked at it initially in its early pilot stage, it was vastly different than when I looked at it even like 6 to 8 months later, when we actually started to, get into further talks. And so you could quickly see that, the technology was quickly moving forward. Even today, I mean, it still continues to update. So, and not that the other platforms weren't doing that, but I think that's what really stood out. Yeah, I think the other one was, they were partnered, you guys were partnered with like 9 insurance companies. You had this connectivity there. There was, this ability to be a beta for growth and change within the technology as well. So just being someone, so if I see something that I didn't agree with, the ability to be able to give you that data point to say, hey, let's work together. Let's take that back to our engineers. Let us figure this out to make it better, was really appealing, knowing that we have an influence in the way this is going to be shaped. So I think that stood out as well. And those talks we had those talks early. And I think that's what really resonated well from a clinical point of view.
Yeah, amazing. And I saw another question in the chat. I think it disappeared, but I believe it had to do with the definition of the waves, Armanda, in the rollout. If you could just, for the audience, briefly describe kind of what a wave is.
Of course. So we began with our pilot, which was about 10 practices. And then each wave consists of like 20 to 40 practices. And we did that very intentionally. That way, like we could devote the time and attention and like education that was needed to each practice in order to ensure that we do get the adoption of the technology immediately. And so how we're doing it is each month we're rolling out a new wave of practices. And so they are, in the next like up and coming excitement of something new coming to their practice. So that's why we talked about being fully integrated by the end of this year. We will have all of our general practices and some of our specialty practices fully integrated with Overjet. But the truth is, to have the success that we've had, we did decide very intentionally to do it in waves, meaning like smaller groups to devote a little bit more time.
Another thing that I noticed also, I picked up on the other day in one of our meetings, I saw some office groups that had been through training and usage, in other words, in earlier waves, and they had slipped a little bit in usage. And talk to us about the strategy that you're using, Armanda, for those groups and how it relates to the next wave to come.
Of course. So yeah, I'm glad you said that. It has, there is going to be some attrition in each practice. And so sometimes like some of your most exciting things do fall wayside on those. So what we're doing by design, and this also like kind of goes back to your question about how the regionals are a part of this, is that we're doing retraining events as we roll out each new wave as well. So when we're looking at people that don't have the usage, then we re-invite them more to like the upcoming new wave for a retraining opportunity. And the regionals have really done like a great job on ensuring that the participation is at 100%.
Yeah, that's very powerful. And then Dr. Chokshi, I just had a thought. You guys are doing what I consider to be a uniquely excellent job with new doctors that are onboarded. Can you speak to that process about how they're actually onboarded through the Overjet platform?
Yeah, no, it's actually, that's been one of the best tools, because so the young doctors come in, one of the first things that young doctors will do, and we do this on purpose, is we really just get them to go through diagnostics, treatment planning, working a patient up, and putting a plan together for them, learning how to communicate with them. We even start that before they actually get right, working and doing the actual dentistry. So again, it was great because it was a communication tool, essentially. A lot of the new doctors were fumbling a little bit in their language of how to communicate, like a cavity as an example. Sometimes they were over communicating on simplistic things, and we all know that as doctors, you can be very simple and be very right to the patient's level, or you can be very technical. And when it's all kind of laid out in front of you, color coded, highlighted, it just becomes a little bit easier of a conversation, which I think was a leg up for our new docs. As they come in, they just have it available. They themselves feel more confident, because I think they themselves feel like, I'm not sure if I should do this or that. A lot of our new grads coming out, they just don't have that experience behind them to say, okay, should I watch this? Should I do this? Should I do a crown here? Should I not? And that's kind of what my earlier comments were really around. It kind of gave them a quicker decision point. So that's kind of how we've brought the new doctors along, using Overjet in particular.
And from the utilization perspective or usage in driving that up for those new grads, I know you guys have kind of a unique educational experience for them. And how does that sort of weave into how we're driving usage of a new technology tool, right, for a doctor who may have just joined the organization?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you asked that. So we do something really, really nice for our new doctors that join. Every quarter, we host what we call a doctor infusion week, and essentially what we're doing is we're immersing our doctors into various clinical educational dentistry talks. So we go through endodontics, we'll go through oral surgery, we'll go through case reviews, treatment planning, and case reviews is where Overjet kind of shines. And in that, it's really just reviewing cases. We'll put up x-rays, we'll poll the audience on, what do you see? And then we'll actually start, and we've kind of now we are now using Overjet as kind of the background findings, right? So in a case review, typically you'll have your FMX, you'll have your photographs, you'll have, cone beam if available, you'll have your medical history, the full workup that we will have. And then you'll walk through, what would you do? How would you sequence and so forth? So we do it in a group setting, and part of that case review will have Overjet findings, which is basically annotated x-rays that show what it reveals. And so it's great because it's just now become part of the repertoire. It's just background information, and it's just become like x-rays that we normally would look at, but that are annotated. So it's kind of nice to have that extra add, and I just envision that getting better going forward, and we can talk about future maybe in a minute, but I get excited about this because I can almost see what I would like to see, and I can envision AI helping us get there.
Yeah, 100%. So the new doctor literally growing up or maturing alongside of AI, and that's very different than what you and I.
Yeah, it's like my kids growing up on iPhones, right? They don't know anything different, right? They just grew up in that world, and it's kind of like our new doctors are growing up in an AI world, and that's just going to be the default setting. So it's very similar.
Yeah, for sure. And you talk about the future, and you and I chat about this a lot. Let's talk about the future. Where the heck are we going with this?
Well, I'm not the guy that knows the future, but or nor do I have a crystal ball. But there's just some really cool things that are going. I mean, so we're using AI in like every facet, right? We're on the clinical front. We're using it in ortho. I mean, you can speak to that, I'm sure, in a lot of detail. We're using it for predictive analysis on, like the aligner side of dentistry. We're using it to We're using it for implant planning, where there's softwares now that will help us make, surgical guides and treatment plan things using AI in the process. We're obviously using it just for basic cavity and perio. So it's being used to automate a lot of things. Scheduling is another one. We're using now AI. There's companies now that are helping us schedule and manage that through an AI process. Patient communication is another one. So you can see all these various things that are happening kind of across the field, and they're coming together, right? And they're all going to start to speak to each other, right? So you're going to have, something here speaking to something here. And, I just, and then we're going to, be beyond the pan and bite wings that we are currently using. We haven't even added CBCTs yet. How is that going to marry into this whole AI world? How are we going to now think about the holistic patient? Have we bridged healthcare AI into dental AI? There's that bridge that we haven't even encountered yet. So there's like so much more to uncover, and so many ways, we can be more efficient. So I think really at the end of the day, it's about being efficient, but it's actually about giving our patients the best potential solutions that may be beyond us, but it's helping us highlight, what's possible.
Yeah, I knew if I let you go long enough, you were going to lead us right to the perfect spot. And that is the perfect spot, because literally this is all about patient care, isn't it? It's a cool technology, and it's a whiz bang thing. But at the end of the day, standardization of care and appropriate care for our patients is what we all are trying to deliver. And this tool has a unique ability to actually prop that up for us, for everyone as a clinician.
100%. And what I've seen, especially, and just getting back to some of just for patients' best care, I always believe that prevention is, the best, right? So we're trying to prevent disease. We're trying to get things early. And so what this technology has also done, at least for the early disease states, is it's allowed us to identify those things that are just, may not seem so obvious. And I think that those little things in the long run will help our cohort of patients, because we'll get to it faster, right? We'll be able to keep things minimal. We'll be able to do things in a more conservative fashion. And then, of course, it will help us bridge the gap on how to treat the more elaborate things, the heavier degree disease processes. It will help us kind of streamline that as well. But that's where I see it. It's all about the patient at the end of the day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I did see another question that came in just now, and I think probably a good time to touch on that. And both of you guys will have an input on this one, I'm sure. What questions should a smaller DSO be asking when vetting an AI partner? I think it's a great question.
So I will share some of the questions that we had, and when we were going through it, were like, how is it going to integrate with our current PMS system, which was flawless. And truthfully, we've taken a lot of our normal workflows within our PMS system and actually migrated it to Overjet, which was really great. Another question was like, how does it cater to each type of role in our business? And then again, like the success, another great call out that Dr. Toksey mentioned earlier too, is the choice really for us, and that we do talk about, you were just talking about patient care, and, outside of like patient care health, patient, emotional integrity too is a really important thing. So when we're talking about having AI in the practice, one of the things we've seen is less claims denials, right? That's a great thing for a patient experience, for patient time, for like, their psychological safety of their finances. And so that was really important factor too, when we were talking about a partner with AI, was, how do we create this ecosystem where we're all fighting the same, battle, meaning like curing disease in the mouth.
Yeah, and to add to what Armanda said, I mean, I think it's all about systems that are user friendly. So I think simplicity is key. I think in picking the right AI partner or platform. I think having the support, as you mentioned, not just clinical support, but having operational support from that partner to make sure that there's adequate training, there's enough infrastructure for that. making sure it's compliant, FDA approved, of course, and I think most are now. And then that was another reason, by the way, we picked Overjet. Aside from the amazing management team, MIT backed, part of the, by the way, that was a factor in picking Overjet. It was really looking at the people who developed the software. Very bright, and we were very impressed. And I think that speaks volumes because they're doing something a little bit unique in that front. And that was another reason. But also the reporting, like the user-friendly aspect, how well do the reports look? Is it easy to get to? Does it integrate with your PMS system? Can you communicate easily between insurance within the clinical field? And does it marry all those together easily? And I think that's just some of them. There could be a lot more that I'm missing, but I think if you check a lot of those boxes, I think you've picked the right one.
Amazing. This has been a really, really fun hour, guys. I appreciate you guys being here for sure. I get to see you during the week, but not always in this type of forum. This is a whole lot of fun. We should do this more often. And I think that for the audience, as we've come to sort of the latter parts of the presentation, let's go ahead and ask for some questions from you guys that are in the audience. Anything that you'd like to pose to us today? I know we hit a few of those during the presentation, but if there are any more, we'd love to address those for you.
As we wait for some of those to come through, I think as we're talking about how you integrate this wave successfully, or any type of AI into your practice successfully, some of the things too that I've personally thought about as my career has evolved in dentistry, which I did start at a time too when we didn't have this type of innovation. But one of the things I think most importantly, some of the feedback we've gotten from our doctors is the mentorship opportunity, right? And so this technology is helping build the confidence of our new doctors and sometimes more of our tenured doctors, because one thing that we don't talk about a lot in dentistry is that relationship bias, right? So you are a practitioner for a long time and you build this really great relationship, almost like a family with your patients. And sometimes it's hard to confront that they might need something that is a little bit more costly. So what has happened is this AI has kind of removed that bias. And so now you're both looking at something and you're understanding it from the same perspective. So I think that was a really big call out too from some of the successes that we've had.
Yeah, the trust factor is a huge thing in clinical dentistry, isn't it? And I think that the other thing that I'm often thinking about is that logic piece. We didn't, you said it, Armanda, but it really, without putting the tag on it, but it's that logic piece of the trust triangle, right?
Right.
The computer, the software, the AI is objective. It's not a subjective finding. It just says yes or no, and then you do with it what you will. But our patients are pretty smart, right? They're out there seeing technology in the world, and they understand that the way computers work basically now. Maybe if 50 years ago, it wouldn't have been that way. But I think today, most people understand that computers are pretty reliable, right? So if they can give us a tool that is objective in nature and take the perceived subjectivity that maybe our patients thrust upon us, I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. So I just saw a question in the chat, and this is really great. Can you point to any mistakes you made in the pilot, what you learned from it, and how you informed your go forward strategy? So yeah, this has actually been, truthfully, from an operational perspective, probably one of the most blessings in our company as well, because some of the things that we didn't identify in some of our rollouts was the technology and ease of taking a training at the practice. So we're asking people to gather in a lunchroom and, take this training. And one of the things that we didn't realize is they may not have had a computer or the ability to take the training from the same space. And then furthermore, what it's also done is really helped us inspect at our level really good equipment that we have. So we've done a lot of refresh of some sensors. We've also done a lot of refresh of patient facing educational modems. So that's been some of the things that, while we won't call them a mistake, it's been kind of an opportunity.
That's a good comment, Armanda, actually, because that's exactly, you'll go between operatory to operatory. And if your monitor, let's say you have one monitor here and another monitor there, the contrast may not be the same. You may have some variance. You may have some sensor variance. But this technology doesn't differentiate between the monitor settings, right? So it'll still highlight what it sees based on the algorithm it's working through. But you might not see it in operatory 8, but maybe it pops up in operatory 9, and you'll see a cavity pop up all of a sudden that you didn't quite see. So that is I totally forgot about that, but that is something else that this technology helps us with. It's just sometimes we miss stuff. It could be for that little fact right there, where you just may not have things kind of in the right contrast. So yeah, just wanted to put that out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another thing that we did learn quickly, and we spoke about this earlier, was that like when we gave the accountability to the Overjet team to host the trainings, there wasn't a lot of immediate adoption. And so what we quickly learned was, again, if we're like in it with them and we are the thought partners of the organization, and coming from our level, asking people to use something, like, and we are also like the evangelists of it. And so when we turned the training and took the responsibility on ourselves, we saw a lot more adoption, we saw a lot more excitement, and we saw our metrics really increase. So that was the other thing, is just taking the accountability on ourselves was really important, and we pivoted quickly in the beginning. And so one other question I do see on here is, how did your IT department assist in this implementation? They are more hands-on, I would say, than myself, Dr. Choksi, and I'm really, it's unfortunate that Dan, our Chief Information and Analytics Officer, couldn't be here, because this is what he wakes up for in the morning. And so one of the big things is obviously the data. So the Power BI metrics that we have that we're able to see refreshed on a daily basis to help us understand, what type of potential we have in each office, or opportunities or successes. Truthfully, we really are like relishing in our successes. Furthermore, they are constantly on calls regularly with our Overjet team on how to, make sure that the technology is mapped over correctly, and that each practice has like the accessibility for Overjet. And the big call out here is really from a cybersecurity perspective. They've done more recently, we've transitioned how each user logs in. Once upon a time, we had an office login that was very generic, and now we've really like refined it to each person has their own user login, which helps keep us, protected from cyber attacks.
And they're also even just doing like just basic things like putting an icon on our PMS system that you just click one button and it logs you right in, right? So, in the previous iteration, we had to click on something and click on another thing, and maybe there were 3 clicks. Now it's 1 click, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about our IT team constantly creating, a user-friendly atmosphere.
That was a great call out. And then lastly, from like our, team member perspective, they've really done a lot of like refreshing on specific equipment. Like this has been our call to action, where, we are talking about garbage in, garbage out. Sometimes we've provided some garbage that brings the garbage in, and we've taken the opportunity to get them better equipment. And IT has been like our champion of that.
And I guess sort of another question that comes to my mind is an overarching one. I'd love to know what you two describe as your secret sauce for success with this. And it likely would apply for any technology that you brought in, not just AI.
Yeah. Well, we do call ourselves the 3-legged stool. So we are definitely a great group to work together. So we do have our IT team with Dan, being the champion from the technology and data perspective. And then operationally, I have that accountability to our organization. And then Dr. Choksi, who is what we were talking about Michael Jordan earlier. He's the Michael Jordan of our clinicians in our organization. And truthfully, he's such a celebrity that whenever he puts a stamp of approval on it, people want it. So that's the 3-legged stool. Dr. Choksi, you can share your.
Yeah, no, I think you said, minus me, it's just amazing to work with great partners. I think that's what it's all about, just having a very fluid partnership, and we all pick each other up, when it comes to this, this initiative. But also just putting a good process chain together. That's another thing that we've really been able to do as a group, understanding how are we going to use this on a daily basis? How are we, as the theme of this topic is, how are we adopting this? Well, we've really put this technology in the hands of our hygienists and assistants almost more than our clinicians, right? Our doctors. And that's actually, in my opinion, even more powerful, because they're the first ones to take the x-rays. They're the first ones to have interface with this technology, typically for like a new patient cleaning scenario. And so we've empowered our hygienists and our auxiliary teams to really immerse in this technology as kind of the first people. to almost tee up the doctor then to come in and be able to have a validation of the findings that have kind of been put out there. So in our workflow, I think we've done a pretty nice job of putting our clinical workflow together that encompasses using all members of the team. And Armanda said it earlier about, even using it in our morning huddle to then rally around the information, before our patients arrive. So it's really been able to, we're able to forecast our schedules on a clinical front a lot better than we used to. And our morning huddles have been redefined. And it's more rallying around the information within everyone's chart. And it's all coming in one place on a dashboard, which has been really good, really amazing.
Amazing. And from a partner's eyes, from a partner's perspective, you guys have done a really outstanding job of this. Just watching it for me, has been incredible to see what you guys have put together. And I think if I wrap those ideas into one bundle, I think it's culture. It's a culture that you have that's leading to your success with this. And that's really what we're talking about today, right? We're talking about implementation and how to drive adoption of something that is completely new, completely different, and to many human beings likely, will provide some degree of resistance. Who moved my cheese? We all know that, right?
Yeah.
So you guys have done a fantastic job of that. And I think it's largely due to the culture over there.
Thank you.
Maybe I could just bring us back to one question that was earlier, and we focused a lot on the implementation of it. And now that you guys are getting to the second year of it, there was a question that was about how much does it cost, and I wonder if we maybe don't say like, I'll give you an out if you don't want to say maybe per, but I'm trying to think about your planning and how, maybe budgeting percentage wise of your technology budget. Like, how are you guys talking about the kinds of investments that you're making in this kind of technology?
So I'm happy to take that from a cost perspective, pricing perspective, obviously, like the larger, quantity, the differential in pricing. So probably not going to go right into that, but what we did, this is an investment, right? And so one of the things that we have talked about too, is like, it does hit our practice level P&Ls. So that's also why it is imperative that like, this was a resource that each role in the office had an accountability to or a function to. And so I hope that answers the question as vaguely as I could be, to not like give away any type of like coupon or anything like that.
Yeah, the one other thing too is just the ROI is immediately there, right? Just the ability to see things that potentially that may have been missed. I mean, it's a no-brainer. And so I think whatever you're paying for this technology, you're going to like 10x, 20x what you would have paid for it, because of what you're now seeing or what you may have missed. And so we accounted for that. We thought about, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we're just new clinician for whatever reason, right? And what this technology will allow us to do in concept is really bridge some of those things that have been missed and put it at the forefront, and be able to execute on care that may have not otherwise been able to be done earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Appreciate it. I think that got to it. I think it's a big topic, right? In our DSOs community and the study clubs, the operations and IT guys, they are talking about, the percentage of and how are they allocating towards all kinds of technology. And as budgets change, they're seeing percentages increasing, going up towards technology investments. And so it's a topic as they're growing and changing systems and PMS systems and things like that, how they're integrating all these other things that they're investing in. So that was appreciated. Thank you.
For sure. Any other questions from you guys in the audience while we have a few more minutes here? We'd love to touch on them.
I am surprised we haven't gotten the question of how did Dr. Tooksy get that amazing head of hair?
And how do I get it?
Just use a lot of gel, it doesn't move.
Yeah.
Not seeing any, we've covered a lot. I don't know if any maybe final remarks or final comments. You can always give a minute or two back.
I mean, if I could just say one thing, I would just say, now that we've had this technology for quite some time, I think, I've seen, and I can speak for what I've seen in Overjet, There's now, they first got FDA clearance for the bite wings, then the PAs, and now we're looking at periapical radiolucencies that are starting to light up. And, having the ability to beta test that and to see the validity of that has been really cool for me personally to say, hey, you know what, this is right, or no, I don't think this is right. And let's, there's some false positives, truthfully. It's not a perfect science. And sometimes we have to reject things. And then there's some false negatives too, right? So it goes both ways. But in my experience, I would say it's about 90% there. There's going to be a 10% or so. Yeah, there's some errors, and that's what it's up to us clinicians to be able to decipher between what's right and wrong, and not allow this technology to be the default necessarily setting. Don't allow the technology to treatment plan for you and not just input whatever it says, but to, as clinicians, truly look at the information, because that's where all the negative discussions start. Like now it's the treatment planner for you. So just keeping that in mind, making sure that we are always looking at the data objectively, making sure that we understand that this is just a tool. It's assisting us at this stage of the game, and who knows, maybe it will get better at some point, and it will get be better than the human. But it's definitely been an enhancement, is probably the best way I could say it.
And I would second that from a clinical perspective. I think that's you've really laid it out really well, Alep. This is a tool, right? It's not a diagnosis making machine, but it will get better iteratively over time. And to your point that you opened up with, we literally are looking at the tip of the iceberg here with dental AI, right? There is a huge, huge runway here, and AI is going to be interwoven into everything that we do in dentistry. So I think that it behooves all of us to spend some time to understand its capabilities, its limitations, and then its promise for the future. And literally the goal here is to improve lives with dental AI. It's all about patients. It's all about clinicians.
Well, Armando, any other comments there? Not to put you on the spot. Those are two strong closing statements there.
No, absolutely. And again, from me being the ops person here, so I just really I just cannot beat the drum enough about how each, role has their place in Overjet or AI. So our revenue cycle team is using it. Our front desk team is using it to build their morning huddles and really inspect their schedules and prevent Swiss cheese in the future on schedules. Right. And from we were talking about the ROI, how much is your time worth? Right. So coming back to less denials on our insurance claims, more opportunity of case acceptance from the patient, communicating the same way as we are, mentorship opportunities. So obviously very passionate about it. And I'm really thankful that we got to talk about it today.
As am I. Dr. Barfield, thank you so much for leading this conversation, and Dr. Choksi and Armando. This has been a lot of fun for me as well. So appreciate everyone who joined us as well in the audience, and we will talk, I'm sure, more about this in the coming months and years to follow. So thank you all.
Thanks, Richie, for hosting us.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Thank you.